It was strictly a filmmaking opportunity. And I've been an actor now, next month will be 36 years. 2000, I shot a short film. Took me 4 years to finish that. Got it into 20 film festivals, won some awards, but didn't go anywhere. But I was trying at the time to get into the filmmaking, behind the camera stuff. I was 1 credit shy of a filmmaker certificate at NYU back in the 80s. I went to the Vancouver Film School back in the mid-90s. I've done over 200 jobs as an actor. I mean, I'm so comfortable on set. I have so many friends in the industry. I need to direct, I need to do something. And so this opportunity presented itself, and it was a very interesting subject, extremely interesting people. I totally fell into it. I wasn't even a wrestling fan. I wrestled in high school. That was the extent of my wrestling interest, really. When I was a kid, growing up in Montreal, I remember watching Bruno Sammartino. You know, he was so huge and so popular, and you only had a few channels on TV, so you know about wrestling. And also Montreal was a hotbed of wrestling at the time. My dad used to watch it, but I was working on a movie, and through that it was called Cinderella Man with Russell Crowe. Angelo Dundee was our technical advisor. So I became very good friends with him. I went to the Boxing Hall of Fame with him a couple times, and I wound up meeting Darren Antola, and this was his idea. And he was friends with like Jimmy Snuka and Greg Valentine, and was hanging out with a lot of wrestlers, a big wrestling fan. I'm like, if you already have these connections, you may be onto something here. So we did a couple meetings. I'm like, I think I should direct this for you. He was like, yeah? Yeah. So I set up a weekend shoot. And the first weekend was just magic. I wound up getting Tito Santana, Greg the Hammer Valentine, superstar Billy Graham, and the oldest living wrestler at the time, Angelo Savoldi. He was 99 years old. So pretty safe to say we probably had his last interview, because I think he passed away just a few months after that. That one weekend, I realized that we were onto something, because I had done all my research. I hired great crew, incredible equipment. We're doing all high-end Canon cameras and stuff, so it was just beautifully shot. The subjects were so open, honest, candid, talking about everything that used to be taboo. Steroids, drugs, talking about doing 8 balls of cocaine, driving between cities to go wrestle. It's like, did you just say that on camera? And they're like, yeah, that's what life was like back then. That's what we did. So knew we were onto something. And that's what it was. It became, every single one of these people, there was nothing to hide. There was no gimmick or whatever. They were just telling their story. The story of 350 Days is life on the road during the territory days. That's it. It's as simple as that. It could have been plumbers. It could have been traveling salesmen, Fuller Brushmen. You remember those guys? It's like, it doesn't matter what this is. It's a human interest story. It's about what did these guys do back then in the day. And this was their life. They just happened to be like really famous wrestlers back then. So you've got this nostalgia if you're older. This is your youth. You've got young people saying, oh my God, these are the guys I used to wrestle before my guys, before my Chris Jericho or my CM Punk or whoever's popular today. It's like, this is what these guys went through. But then we take it even further than that. We have guys back in the 40s. We have this whole thing with Gorgeous George. We've got a segment from with Killer Kowalski in it. It's like, do these young people remember these names? Well, they should. And there it is. Now it's in this documentary. That was always our first question when we asked them, because we always had a series of about maybe 10 questions that kind of gets everything. But the first question is, what does 350 mean to you? And they all knew exactly what you're talking about. Oh, 350 means, being abused by a promoter. Oh, it means, missing my daughter's birthday. Oh, it means, being in a van with 10 wrestlers driving 500 miles. It's like so specific, to them. And, so 350 is, they know what that means. That's how often they would wrestle a year. Now, not every wrestler did that, of course, and even like Bret Hart said, well, I would do more like 320, 330 a year. That's Bret Hart, and he's still wrestling that often a year. As an actor, I live that life. I don't work 350 days a year, but I work at trying to get work 350 days a year. I mean, I have to audition. What's the difference between driving to an audition than driving from one gig to another? And they're getting, $25, $30 a gig. And they're breaking their bodies and they're like destroying themselves for this little art. I mean, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm not working 350 days. But that's the one thing I like about these guys. I found that how similar we are. They're more of a complete package. What I do is I learn my lines, I get in front of a camera, I do my part, and that's it. These guys have to be good on the mic. They have to have improv skills up the wazoo, right? They have to create drama. They have to set up this fight, this conflict. The outfits, right out of kabuki theater, Japanese kabuki theater. What are they doing? They're creating like this soap opera. They're choreographers. They're directing their own scenes. They tell each other what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how it's going to end. That's everything in one. I just do one little part of it. And then on top of that, of course, they're physical and they're athletes, they're stuntmen. It's pretty fascinating. I knew it wasn't real, but the level of discussions or what went into it is fascinating. Like when Bret Hart says, you've got a 300-pound guy jumping off the ropes, and he's going to fall on you, and he falls a feather away from you and doesn't hurt you, and the trust and skill that goes into that. I had no idea. It's like it's just a bunch of guys jumping off of ropes, smashing into each other. It's like, no, the level of skill that goes into that. And when he says things like, Robert De Niro may gain 300 pounds for a movie role, but will he take a steel chair to the head? And that's some serious commitment there. So even as an actor, would I do that? Well, if it was choreographed, and I wouldn't know how to do that. That's pretty insane. And they do this all the time. Burning tables and jumping off of, it's just crazy stuff. So it's a newfound respect, appreciation. It's just something I had no idea really existed, or how they did it. And that's, I think that's the best takeaway I got, because going into it, I had no idea. And so now this whole new world has been opened to me. And here I am at the CAC, right? It's like people come here, Las Vegas, every year to hang out with wrestlers and stuff. They're devoted fans. Like, wow, there's this fan base that loves this. So I'm just kind of glad that I'm somewhat part of it now. And I hope I've done it justice. When I was in film school, I always had a problem with documentaries, because I'd get into these arguments with my instructor because I didn't understand what the difference was between a film and a documentary. If you're putting a camera in front of somebody, they're going to react a certain different way. If it's a drama, of course, you've learned your lines and all that. But if all of a sudden you introduce this camera into somebody that's never had a camera on them, they may not be as forthcoming. They may be lying. They may be doing something to get something across. So I'm like, so how is that really different than a movie? So I still struggle with that. But what I find is that what I was able to do is make them so comfortable, and they believed in the project and what I was doing, and there was no Vince bashing. I wasn't trying to get any dirt on anybody. All I was trying to do is tell the story of their life on the road during the territory days. And so they just opened up. They were so candid and they felt so at ease, and nothing was off the table. Shoot videos, you get, oh yeah, the promoter was so-and-so and we were in that territory, and and I wrestled that guy and I went that many rounds, and it's like, you've already heard all that. I'm trying to do something a little different. One of the things I specifically did was made sure it wasn't a shoot documentary. I pretty much saw every documentary I could have that was available, from, Beyond the Mat to Lipstick and Dynamite. I mean, everything. I've read everybody's book, from, Bret Hart's 450-page encyclopedia, the Roddy Piper, Ted DiBiase. I mean, you name it. I just read everything. And the one thing they tell you, documentary-wise, they don't want talking heads, right? So that's what I tried to avoid. That's why we had so much footage, so many pictures, and like even now, you've got one angle, all right? One shot, very static. People will be very bored very quickly. So you need content. That's one of the reasons why it took us so long to make the movie, because we had to get the fans. We went to museums, photographers, friends of friends, blah, blah, blah. It was really hard. 6 years in the making. I shot 72 people in my documentary. 38 made the cut. And I think a lot of these guys have kind of been forgotten, like the Wolfman. Who was the Wolfman? The guy used to wrestle in the 70s. I found him in Toronto. It's like, you know about the Wolfman now. He was forgotten. And then it's huge people like Bret Hart and Ted DiBiase and Paul Orndorff. They were huge back then. And you look at them now and it's like, I remember him. It's like, wow, he doesn't look that good. It's like, what was it like back then? And you remember when you were a kid watching him and like, he was going through that? I thought he was flying in jets and limos and stuff. It's like, no, they were driving each other. They were eating bologna sandwiches, bologna blowouts, they used to call them. Don Fargo was friggin' awesome. Prison tear tattoo. He's all inked up. He'd been in jail. He said on camera that he'd had 18 different gimmicks, and he lived every single one like a method actor. So he said he was his characters. So he would have to go into bars and start shit, right? And start fights and all that. And the promoters loved him because he was drawing heat. So yeah, you could tell he had lived a life. He'd lived pretty hard. And I remember reading that he wrestled, one of his gimmicks was the fabulous Fargo brothers. They sold out Madison Square Garden in 1960. Sold out Madison Square Garden. It's like, wow, that's like just super mind-boggling to me. It's like wrestling. It's like, oh. And the fabulous Fargo brothers, who are they? Like, they were big enough to sell out Madison Square Garden. And this guy was like, he was really interesting. Long hair and neck tattoos, and he was so cool. Don Leo Jonathan. So he used to wrestle as the Mormon Giant. And he was quite popular the 60s and 70s. And he was instrumental in getting Andre the Giant involved in wrestling, I guess, because he used to wrestle him when he was still Jean Ferrer. So, super famous wrestler. But when he's done wrestling, he's best friends with Jacques-Yves Cousteau, the marine biologist. So he's got this whole thing where him and his son help design underwater gear for underwater exploration. His job was welding underwater and like oil rigs. He was a big game hunter. He designs and makes museum quality knives. If that wasn't enough, the leather sheaths that it goes into. It's like, this guy was such a Renaissance man. He was just, but what was his start? He was a wrestler. Not only was he all of that, he was also a judo expert. And I think he lost by like 1 point or something in the Olympics or some major thing. The guy was like a martial arts legend too. It's like, and he claims, and I don't know if he was joking or if he was serious about it, he kind of had the sideburns, like the Elvis sideburns, before Elvis did. And so he claims that Elvis stole his look. So if you can picture like a 6'9" Elvis with this giant body, that was Don Leo Jonathan back then. He was a fascinating guy. I really loved the guy. I would have easily shot 200 if I had the opportunity. More is better. And even if it's just like series of little jump shots, it's color, it's mood, it's tone, it's you're telling the story through just, even if it's just a few clips, it's movement, it's speaking a language. My editor, Michael Burlingame, did a great job. He used to do videos for Sting, Paul McCartney, so he knows his craft. Editing makes the movie. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, any movie. You have a script, obviously the writing is the most important thing. You have to have a great actor delivering those lines, but then what? You got to put it together. And then, you know, even little things like music. If you don't have the right music to it, it's like, you know, a crying scene, you're not going to play banjos, right? You can't play sad music on a banjo. What I'm really hoping is that if this is successful, if people really respond well, I already have so much footage. I've shot a total, I think it was either 21 or 22 days. I've got something 120 hours of footage, 150 hours, I mean, like ridiculous amount. And so there's so many people that I want to thank that didn't make it into this cut, that need to be there. I spoke to historians, to promoters, to trainers, to indie wrestlers, midgets, female, black, white, young, old, you know, people that rang the bell, you know, fake commissioners that had a gimmick, people that had a gimmick, wanted to start wrestling, didn't make it, people that made it that weren't successful. I mean, there's just so many that didn't make this cut that are part of this story. It's all part of this life in the territory days. So I would like to continue telling that story, but only if people want to see it. Indie documentaries do not make money. So if you do like this movie, please spread the word. Please buy so that we can do the director's cut, because obviously you have to pay editors to do it. And yeah, support your local independent documentary maker. Please.